I loved the Nintendo Switch so much that when I found out about its redesign, the Switch Lite, and the original model with a stronger battery, I became so happy I puked my pants. Because every time a console gets a redesign, it improves everything from the original 100% of the time. Or so I thought anyway. But after I did a little research on the dark web, I actually discovered that many of these redesigns were somehow worse than their original counterparts. And that my neighbor Terry selling crystals that he made with his chemistry set in my living room, but now I'm just thinking out loud. I know it's hard to believe that console redesigns could ever be worse, but whether they're meant to be budget options or things just got botched along the way, I was able to come up with the 10 worst examples of all time. So let's get things started with number 10, the Nintendo 2DS. I might get some poop for talking shit on the original 2DS, but I'm not gonna pretend this thing's not a downgrade. I know it's a budget option, and holding it honestly feels better than it looks. But the mono speaker just doesn't do it any favors, and it can't even play a handful of new 2DS games or Super Nintendo games from the eShop. So you might as well just spend a little bit more on any of the other 3DS models. Well, almost any, more on that later though. Number 9, the Game Boy Micro. Alright, look, the Game Boy Micro's grown on me in recent years, so I do feel a little bad putting it here, but I can in good conscience say this isn't a downgrade from the Game Boy Advance SP. It does have a headphone jack, which was sorely missed from the SP, plus it holds an excellent charge, has interchangeable faceplates, and the screen usually looks wonderful, but the problem is, only when you can actually tell what's going on. Sure, it's convenient to travel with, and it's even small enough to smuggle into North Korea, but if you play games with any kind of text, you're probably going to form a cataract if you try to play longer than 5 minutes. And to make matters worse, you can't even play original Game Boys on it like you could with the predecessors, so you'd have to be some kind of psychopath to prefer this over the SP model. Unless you're playing platformers or something though, I guess. Because I've got to admit, I'm pretty impressed they were able to make this thing as small as they did. I mean, I definitely have something smaller than this, but it's still impressive. Number 8, the Super Nintendo 2. You know, come to think of it, I'm not actually sure that this is called the Super Nintendo 2, but it's not like I have any way of finding out. So for this video, the Super Nintendo 2 is definitely what it is. And if you don't like it, then you know what? You can please subscribe. The original Super Nintendo is a great console. In fact, you could even call it perfect for the early 90s. But in 1997, Nintendo decided it wasn't quite so perfect anymore, and they released the Super Nintendo 2. It was a budget console that cost $100, and it came bundled with Yoshi's Island, which is a pretty goddamn good deal. Technically, it's not really worse than the original model since you can play the entire SNES library perfectly, but the console just feels cheap, and not that you'd ever want to use the RF switch for any other reason than to torture a prisoner who has valuable secrets. But the fact that it's missing a feature that the original model has is still technically a downgrade. Although, I use the term downgrade loosely here since I guess you could consider it an upgrade to not have an RF switch. Number 7, the PS3 Slim. The PS3 was a huge success, but it originally got off to a pretty rough start. So in an attempt to cut costs, Sony went back to the drawing board and came up with the PS3 Slim, which is actually the model I owned. But even though I preferred the new matte finish since it didn't show fingerprints or poop stains, it lost backwards compatibility with PlayStation 2 games, which is a huge letdown for me. And it was even weirder because PS2 games were still being made at the time. You might think I should have put the Super Slim here instead, but I don't know, I kinda like consoles where games can't get stuck inside. The PS3 Slim's not the worst thing in the world or anything like that, but if there was ever a time to not lose backwards compatibility, it's definitely when a struggling platform loses the ability to play games from the most popular console of all time. Number 6, the Genesis 3. This is a pretty decent way to play Genesis games, but with it being a later model, you'd think it'd be the best. However, not only is this version incompatible with the Sega CD and 32X, but you also can't even play the entire library of original Genesis games. And to make matters worse, it doesn't even have the decency to tell you whether or not it's on with a light. An on light might not be that big of a deal to you, but goddammit, I think it's an underrated feature. And I don't know why any console maker would ever exclude it, let alone consciously take it away once it was already there. To be fair though, you might not count this as a console redesign since Sega didn't actually make it themselves, but they still signed off on it, so you better believe I'm gonna roast them for it. But while we're giving Sega the business, let's move on to one of the dumbest console re-releases ever. Number 5, the Sega Master System 2. This is probably the most pointless console redesign of all time because it came out the exact same day as the Mega Drive did in Japan. I mean, that'd be like Nintendo releasing a Wii U Lite the same day as the Switch. Granted, the Master System was more popular in Japan than it was in North America, but even the Wii U was more successful, so overall it was still quite a silly thing for Sega to do. It ditched AV cables for the dingus RF switch. Plus, it couldn't even play game cards, and it wasn't compatible with games that required 3D glasses. It might be cheaper than the Model 1, even in the aftermarket, but if you have a Master System 2, then your life's gonna be filled with regret, and your family's probably gonna disown you unless you pony up the dough and just buy the original model. Although, I will admit, it's pretty cool that Alex Kidd came preloaded on the system. Number 4, the DSi. The Nintendo DSi is something I consider to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. I mean, I'm sure Nintendo made a profit off it, but in the long run, it's kind of forgotten. It's slightly better at playing DS games than the original models, but the worst part about this thing is that it lost the ability to play Game Boy Advance games. The Game Boy Advance is getting pretty old at the time, so it really wasn't that big of a deal since you could play DSi games instead. But if you want to play original DS games in the modern day, then you're better off just using a 3DS. And if you ask me, that puts the DSi in an awkward place in gaming history. It's pretty much the same thing as that popular guy in high school who ended up getting fired from Denny's a decade later for cranking guys in the bathroom to make a few extra bucks. You're not so cool now, are you, Waylon? Number 3. The Nintendo 3DS XL. With the Nintendo DS currently being the second most popular gaming device of all time, only slightly behind the PS2, Nintendo thought they could do no wrong with their next handheld, the 3DS. But deciding to release the 3DS at $250 with Steel Diver and Pilot Wings instead of Mario or Zelda, the system was off to a pretty rocky start. And it wasn't long before Nintendo slashed the price by $80, which lost them a lot of money on every console sold. But then when people started buying it once all the good games started coming out, Nintendo probably realized they messed up. So in an attempt to increase their profits, they released the 3DS XL, which was supposed to be superior to the original model in every way. But besides a bigger screen, everything else took a pretty goddamn big dip in quality. The sound was somehow even worse than the 2DS's monotone speakers, and the plastic felt even cheaper than my uncle's homemade carbon monoxide detector. Thankfully, the new 3DS eventually came along and fixed all these issues, but for me, it was a rough couple years. And it's a shame that all the cool limited edition 3DS XLs are unplayable now, because the Persona one looked pretty damn cool. Number 2. The Wii Mini. One of the best parts about the Wii is that it could play games from all of Nintendo's previous home consoles, whether it be through the backwards compatibility of the GameCube or the ability to download classics via the Virtual Console. And it was bad enough when Nintendo quietly took GameCube backwards compatibility away with the later Wii models, but taking online capabilities away from the Wii Mini was really going the extra mile in dickery. The redesign itself looks alright, and to be fair, you can't even connect the Wii to the internet anymore anyway unless you're using Reconnect 24, which is kind of a pain in the ass. But when this thing originally came out, the internet was still a thing with the Wii. So if you want to play this console in the modern day, then you might as well just get the original model that doesn't suck horse eggs. Number 1. The PSP Go. If you need confirmation as to why a rumored digital-only PS5 would die a slow, horrible death, then just look at how things worked out for the PSP Go that tried the exact same thing in 2009. I know digital games are way more popular now than they were before, but holy hell, did the PSP Go really jump the gun or what? As if it wasn't bad enough to deny consumers the right to resell games with a brand new console, taking that right away from an already established console's redesign's a brand new level of stupidity, especially if you're not even going to make the digital games any cheaper. Imagine being a PSP owner back then and not being able to play your games on the new platform. And even if you didn't already own a PSP at the time, you'd have to be insane to consider buying the Go, especially with there being so many deals on physical games at the time. And it's probably not going to be very long before this thing's not even able to connect to the internet at all, which just might possibly make it the most useless console of all time, which is very unlike the two most useful console redesigns of all time and today's patrons of the day, Dojin Shinji and Red Jar. What do you think about the worst console redesigns of all time, though? Was there anything I missed, or was there anything you think shouldn't have been here? Either way, let me know what you think in the comments below, and I'll respond to every last goddamn person. Don't forget to press that subscribe button if you want to prove to the world that you're a super ultra mega badass. And if you want to go an ass hair further in helping this channel grow, then liking and sharing this video really does go a long way. This is CameronAllOneWord, and one of these days I will return.